Okay, there's a lot of information that we need to get out of these quadratics, these parabolas. And so the vertex is one that we've already dealt with a little bit. And also getting some other points from that vertex by sort of the slope kind of thing. If you go over one, up one, sometimes the up is more than one. Well, then we also need to be able to find the zeros. Now, zeros are easy to get when you have it factored like this. So really what this means is some number times some other number is 0. Let's say you didn't know, let's say you have a number and you have, this one is 0. See how it doesn't matter what this one is? If this one is 0, it doesn't matter what this is. This could be 92, or it could be 192. It could be really anything. It could be any unknown. As long as this one is 0, then the whole thing is 0. And likewise, if the first one is 0, then it doesn't matter what the second one is. So only when you have two things multiplied together, only one of them actually has to add up to 0. I want to use that idea down here. Only one of these actually have to add up, actually have to be 0, because if this one is 0, it's 0 times whatever. So when you have two factors like this, they each have their own answer. Whatever this one is, as long as we make that one 0, the whole thing will be 0. So if I add 4 to both sides, of course 4 makes it 0. If I stick a 4 there and a 4 there, see over here, 5 times 4 is 20 minus 7, so it makes this side 13, but it makes this side 0, and 0 times 13, sure enough, is 13. And likewise, 5n minus 7 equals 0. If I can make this one 0, so if I just add 7 to both sides, and then divide off the 5, if I stick 7/5 in this one, it makes this side 0, and 7/5 minus 4 is some kind of fraction, but I don't care what fraction it is, because whatever it is, times 0 is 0. So if I stick 7/5 up here in both spots for n, it makes the whole thing 0, and if I stick 4 up here, it makes the whole thing 0. Okay, so that's what are called the zeros, and I'll show you what those mean in just a second. So the other thing we needed was the vertex. Okay, well the way to get the vertex, I'm going to go ahead and multiply this back together. N times n is 5n squared, n times negative 7, negative 4 times 5 is 20n, and negative 4 times negative 7 is positive 28, and that's equal to 0. Now instead of setting it equal to 0, I'm going to let it equal y, because I want some points out of that. And not only that, I'm going to call these n's x. So really have 5x squared minus 27x plus 28 equals y. Okay, now let's do some of the same things that we were doing before. I'm going to go ahead and move the 28 to the other side. So we have 5x squared minus 27x equals y minus 28. We have to have this first piece to be a 1, so I'm going to divide out the 5, so that leaves an x squared. 27 divided by 5, I'm just going to call that 27/5 x, leave a hole. So I'm just completing the square so I can see what the vertex is. Okay, then we halved this spot. Okay, 27/5 cut in half is 27/10. All right, I'm going to use my calculator to get the rest of it. So 27/10 is 2.7, and I would like to square that. Oops, sorry. So it's 7.29. I think I'm going to go to decimals here. So this squared is 7.29. So I'm going to add 729 there. That means I got to add 729 there, but really it's been multiplied by 5. So 729 times 5 is what I added on that side. So really I added 3645. So I added 3645 here, so I'm going to add 3645 here. Okay, so what that does is it makes that 5 out there. And remember, this 27/10 is the factor part, so it's x minus 2.7 all squared. That's the 27/10. And then over here I need 3645. I'll subtract the 28 is 845. Okay, and then I'm going to divide off the 1/5 here. I'm going to move the 5 to the other side. So it's x minus 2.7 all squared, and then 1/5 y plus 8.45. Okay, so this means that the y's are 5 times more. Instead of going over 1, up 1, I'm going to go over 1, up 5. So here's the vertex. It's at 2.7 and negative 8.45. Okay, I'm going to plot that. Negative 2.7-ish and then down about 8.45, somewhere right about there. Okay, then from there, I'm just going to say P for the next point. So remember, we'd go over 1 and up 1. So if I go right 1 of 2.7, I'm at 3.7. And if I'm at negative 8.45 and go up 1, I'm at negative 7.45. Oh, but I don't want to go up 1. I'm sorry, I want to go up 5 because the y's are 5 times taller. So I would have gone over 1, up 5. So negative 8.45 add 5 would be at negative 3.45. And then another point, so that was 1 to the right of 2.7, 1 to the left of 2.7 is 1.7, and then negative 8.45 up 5 will be at negative 3.45 again. Okay, so there's the vertex in 2 points. If I go to 3.7 to negative 3, whatever that is, 3.7, 1, 2, 3.7, and then negative about 3.5. Right about there. And oh, I put the vertex at the wrong spot. I went negative 2 points. So the vertex should have been a positive 2.7. The vertex is really right there. And then 1.7, 375 or 345 is right about there. Okay, here's the zeros. Okay, the zeros are where it crosses the x-axis, where it has 0 height. So here, the x is 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it has 0 height. That's what we're finding when we're up here. We're finding where it's crossing the x-axis. So one of the zeros is at 4, 0, and another one of the zeros is at 7/5, so 1 and 2/5. So 7/5 is 1.40. So at 1.40 is right there, and there's the parabola. Okay, so we got the drawing, and then here was the answers I was looking for. I'm looking for the vertex, the point to the right and the point to the left, and then the 2 zeros. Okay, let's try that again. Okay, the zeros are easy. N equals 3 makes that one 0. If we stick a 3 right there, it's 0. 4n plus 5 equals 0. I can subtract the 5 and divide off the 4. Okay, there's the 2 zeros. I can plot those already. 1, 2, 3, 0. Right there's that one. It means it's over 3, up 0. This one is negative 1 1/4, up 0. Negative 1 1/4, up 0. So there they are on the graph. That's what finding the zeros are. Okay, I'm going to complete the square and get the rest of the things. So I can get the vertex, and then a point to the right of the vertex and a point to the left of the vertex. Okay, so if I multiply this together, that's 4n squared. N times 5 is 5n, and here's another negative 12n, so positive 5 minus 12 will be negative 7n, and then negative 3 times 5 is negative 15, and I'm going to set that equal to y now. Not to 0. I don't want the zeros anymore. I want the x and the y, so I get the vertex. Okay, I'll move the 15 over. I'm going to switch the letters over to x. 4x squared minus 7x equals y plus 15. Okay, I've got to factor out the 4. So it's really 4, and then, so dividing a 4 out of that, dividing 4 from 7 makes it 7/4 equals this side over here. The 7/4 has to get cut in half, so that becomes 7/8. So to cut in half a fraction, you can just double the denominator. So squaring that up, 7 squared is 49, 8 squared is 64. So there it is as a fraction, but it was really multiplied by 4. I'm going to in turn get the rest of it from my calculator. So 49 64 times 4. So really on that side, I added 306.25. So I'll also add 306.25 over here. 0625 is, I'm sure, a clean fraction. I'm going to take off the 3 and fractionate it. That's 1/16. So it's 3 and 1/16. Just seems easier to deal with as a fraction. You can leave it a decimal if you want to. Okay, so here we go. 4 is the multiplier. Here's the perfect square, x minus 7/8 squared. So now I have y plus another 15 plus another 3 and 1/16, so 18 and 1/16. I'm going to put the 4 to the other side, so I'll divide both sides by 4. So we have x minus 7/8 all squared, and then 1/4 y plus 18 and 1/16. So this is, the y part is 4 times taller. So here's our vertex. The vertex is at 7/8 and negative 18 and 1/16. Okay, I would go over 1 and up 1. So my next point, I need to go 1 to the right of this. So it would be 1 and 7/8. And then I would go over 1 and up 1. So that up 1 would be 17 and 1/16. But I want to go up 4. So I'll make it negative 14 and 1/16. Take 7/8 and go 1 to the left. So 7/8, 1 to the left, we'll make it at negative 1/8. And then up 14 and 1/16. So there's the 2 points. The zeros I have right here, 3, 0, and the other 0 was at negative 5/4, 0. Okay, there they are. Let's get them plotted. That should make a parabola. I already got the zeros on there. The vertex, 7/8, so over 7/8 and down 18. So I'm going to put it right there and just call it 7/8, negative 18 and 1/16. Now, what you can do is if these other ones are also not on the grid, and that's not really to scale because it should have been down way more, these 3 dots will good. You don't have to, if these 2 are really not on the grid, you don't have to, if the vertex is really crazy, don't worry about graphing, putting those dots on there. So that will be good enough for the picture, just the 3 that we can kind of see, but have all 5 answers. The vertex, one unit to the left, 1 unit to the right, and the 2 zeros. Okay, let's take a look at number 5. Okay, well, first of all, to get the zeros, so now this one's not factored. Let's add 6 to both sides and get it factored. We got 8n squared plus 72n plus 160 equals 0. Now, to get the zeros, you can just divide by 8 because everybody divides by 8. Okay, so if I divide it all by, I'm actually not going to divide by 8. I'm going to factor the 8 out, and I'll show you here in just a second. So if I divide out the 8, that's n squared. 72 divided by 8 is, what, 9, and 160 divided by 8 will be 20. Okay, this piece will factor. I need something that multiplies to 20 while adding to 9. Well, that's going to be 4 and 5. So n plus 4 and n plus 5. See, the inners multiplied, that's 4, plus the outers are 5. 4 and 5 make 9, check. 4 times 5 make 20, check. Okay, so here's the zeros. Technically, this is one of them, 8 equals 0. Well, that doesn't make any sense, so do we throw that out? And then here's the other one, n plus 4 equals 0, so negative 4. And of course, this one will be negative 5. So there's the zeros. That means when I go graph them, I'm going to have a 0 at negative 4, another 0 at negative 5. So those two are really close together. The 8 was not in play, which is why we could have divided everybody by 8, and then the 8 wouldn't have even been there, and we still would have gotten negative 4 and negative 5. So the 8 doesn't really matter for the zeros because we throw it out anyway, but it does matter for the graph. That 8 is going to be it's going to affect the height. So when we do this problem and set it equal to 0 like this, the 8 can't be divided out. So it's got to be 8x squared plus 9x plus 20 equals y. See, up here, if I would have done that and made that equal to a y, we can't divide by 8 because y doesn't divide by 8. There's no number on the y. So the 8 stays with it. Okay, well, if I multiply that 8 in there, I'm going to do this step basically I'm taking it back up to what it was. 8x squared plus 72x, 8 times 20 is 160 equals y. I just want to make sure we get the 160 put over there. Okay, so the 160 is going to be over here with the y at negative 160. Now on this side, I do want to pull the 8 back out. So 8 and 72 can both be divided by 8. So now it's 8x squared plus 9x. Okay, we drop that middle piece in half, so 9 halves. Multiply it in. 9 squared is 81, 2 squared is 4. So I'm adding 81 fourths. You could have done that as a decimal if you wanted to. I didn't really add 81 fourths. I added 8 times 81 fourths, so I am going to use my calculator for that. 81 fourths times 8. On that side, I really added 162. So if I added 162 over here, I'm going to add 162 over here. Okay, so we've got 8. Here's the factored part with an addition, so it's x plus 9 halves, if you like that as a decimal better, is 4.5. And it equals negative 160 plus 162 makes the y term just have a 2 on it, and I'm going to move the 8 to the other side. So I'm going to divide both sides by 8. So I have x plus 4.5 equals 1/8 y plus 2. Okay, there's the vertex. The vertex is at negative 4.5, negative 2. And then the y number is 8 times taller. So instead of going over 1, up 1, it's going over 1, up 8. Okay, so the next point, going to the right one of that, would be negative 3.5. And I want to go up 8. So negative 2 up 8 is positive 6. And then I want to go, here's to the right of it, so I want to go to the left of it at negative 5.5 and up 8 more, so that'll be at 6. So there's the 2 points to the side. So if I were to graph those two, negative 4.5, negative 2. Negative 4.5, negative 2, it's right there. Negative 3.5 goes up 6. 1, 2, 3.5 is up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It's right there. And then negative 5.5 is up 6 is right there. And then the zeros, one of them is at negative 4, 0. And the other 0 is at negative 5, 0, which I already have graphed, and they all fit together. So here are the 5 points I'm looking for. The vertex, 2 points on the side, and then the 2 zeros. Okay, number 6, I'm going to move the 3 to the other side. So really this problem is 7n squared minus 21n. 17 minus 3 makes it 14. So as long as I don't have a y over there, I can just divide everybody by 7. So I got n squared minus 3n plus 2. That makes it easy to see the factor. So it looks like I need to multiply by 2, but add up to negative 3. So how about a negative 2 and a negative 1? Negative 2 times negative 1 is 2, and the inners are negative 2, the outers are negative 1. Negative 2 plus negative 1 is negative 3. So here the 0 is 2. That makes this piece 0, and here the 0 is 1. So once again, this is going to be a pretty tight graph. It's going to be 0 at 2 and a 0 at 1. Okay, but to find the vertex, you cannot divide out that 7. So it's 7, I mean, we factor it out later. So it's 7n squared minus 21n plus 14 equals y. See, now I can't divide everybody by 7 because of the y. So I'll move the 14 to the other side. So it'll become y minus 14. So now that part's gone. And I am going to factor out the 7. So I'm going to divide out the 7, leaving n squared minus 3. Okay, take the negative 3 and cut it in half, so negative 1.5, or negative 3 halves. Square that into the whole. So 3 squared is plus 9, 2 squared is 4, so I'm adding 9 fourths times 7. So it added 9/4, but I had a multiplier of 7. So that side really added 1575. So I added 1575 here, so I'll add 1575 here. Okay, here's the main factor. Here's the perfect square. So I've got n minus 3/2 all squared. And negative 14 plus 1575 will be 175. Let me move the 7 to the other side. I'm going to switch it over to x's again. This variable here is always the x-axis because we set it equal to y. This is the y one. This one's the x one. So it's x minus 3/2 is 1.5. I'll go to decimals now. And 1/7, the 7 comes to the other side, y plus 175. Okay, there's the vertex. 1.5 for the x and negative 1.75 for the y. Okay, let me go 1 point to the right, so I'll go 2.5. In my mind, I'm sliding over 1 unit on the x. So instead of going over 1, up 1, I'm going over 1. The y's have been multiplied by 7, so I got to go up 7. So 7, I have a negative 175, add 7. 525. So that's the 1.5 to the right. 1.5 to the left puts it at 0.5, and it'll be up the same amount. Then I've got my zeros. Over here I have a 2, up 0, and here I have another 0 at 1, up 0. All of this should fit on this grid and make a parabola. So here's the vertex. 1.5 down 175. So 1.5 down 175 is right about there. Perfect. The vertex is always right between the two zeros, by the way. So then I've got to go 2.5 up 525. 2.5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 25, right about there. And 0.5 is right about there. And there's all 5 dots that fit. So if those dots don't make a parabola, made a mistake someplace. Here are the 5 solutions, the 5 points that I'm looking for. Okay, so it's pretty repetitive from there. So you find the zeros, and then you complete the square to get the vertex and the other 2 points. I'm going to take both of these and put it that way so it's equal to 0. In order for zeros to happen, it's got to equal 0. So really this is n squared minus 10n plus 24 equals 0. I need something that will multiply to 24 while adding to 10. 6 and 4 should do that. So I have an n and an n, so 6 and 4 will add up to 10 as long as I make them both negative. So now here's the negative 6, and here's negative 4, and negative 6, and negative 4, make negative 10, and negative 6 times negative 4 is positive 24. So here's the 2 zeros. N equals 6 is one of them, and n equals positive 4 is the other one. So 6 and 4 is where this one is crossing. 6 and 4. Okay, now I want to get the vertex. So right here, I'll do x squared minus 10x plus 24 equals y. And complete the square on that. So I'll move the 24 that way. So I've got x squared minus 10x equals y minus 24. I'm going to have the b term, so negative 5. Square that into the whole. Negative 5 times negative 5 is 25. No multiplier out here, so if I add 25 there, I'll add 25 there. Okay, so here's the perfect square. X minus 5 all squared. That's why we write it down, because that's the answer. Equals y, negative 24 plus 25 is 1. So now the multiplier is a 1 every place, so over 1, up 1 actually is the next point. So here's the vertex, 5, negative 1. Okay, the next point, go to the right, 6. So if I go over 1, up 1, so this will become 0. The next point, go the other side from the 5. So I went up from the 5, I'll go down from the 5. It'll still be up 1 from the negative 1, 0. And then here are zero. Okay, notice those happen to be the zeros. So I'm going to call these two the zeros. I don't want to have the point. If that happens, don't make the point and the zeros the same thing. I'm turning those into z. Let me get another point. Remember, the other thing that this did would go, so 1, 1 would work, but 2, 4 works. So if I go over 2 from the vertex, I'm at 7, and then up 4. So -1 up 4 is 3. And the other point will go the other way too. So 5 back up 2 puts it at 3, and then -1 up 4 puts that one at 3. So I want the points to be unique from the zeros. Okay, vertex 5, -1 right there. I already have the two zeros plotted. The next 2 points are, so one of them is at 7, 3, and the other one is at 3, 3. And sure enough, they make a parabola. And here were the answers. Okay, number 10 has an interesting little thing. I'm going to go ahead and take that 48 and put it to the other side. So I have 6b squared minus 48b equals 0. Okay, well, let's see. I'm going to go ahead and factor out a 6b. If I divide by 6b, 6b squared divided by 6b is just b. 48 divided by 6 is 8, and we took the b. Okay, these are both zeros. 6b equals 0. Divide both sides by 6, so one of the zeros is at 0, and then of course the other one is at 8. So the x numbers are 0 and 8. This is going to be a much wider parabola, it looks like. Okay, I'm going to pick up right here. I'm going to let 6x squared minus 48x equal y. Well, before I can cut this in half and square it in, this has got to be a 1, so I'll factor out the 6. So this time I'm not going to factor out the x, I just want to factor out the 6. So I got x squared minus 8x equals y. Take the 8 and cut it in half. So -8 cut in half is -4. -4 squared is 16. Okay, I really didn't just add 16. I added 6 times 16. So really I added 96. So if I add 96 over here, we'll add 96 over here. So I've got 6, which is the multiplier, x minus 4, which is the perfect square, and over here, it's y plus 96. Okay, I'm going to move the 6 to the other side, so it's x minus 4. Dividing both sides by 6 puts this at 1/6 y plus 96. Okay, here's the vertex. The vertex is at 4, -96. The zeros are at 0 and 8. Okay, if I go right 1 from that, that'll make it 5. So I should go over 1, up 1 from the 96, but I'm going to go up 6. So -96 up 6 puts it at -90. 4 going the other way, so the other point will be at 3, -90. And then the zeros are up here, 0, 0, and 8, 0. Okay, here's the vertex, 4, -96, 4, so way down here, 4, -96. Of course, it's much deeper than that, but I don't want to go off the page. And then the 5 is at -90. I can't really put that on there also. So here it is. If the 2 points are extremely off the grid, you can get by with just 3 points. But I do want all 5 answers from where the other 2 points really are. Okay, 13, we've got to get the zeros and then complete the square. So move that 1 over there. So we have x squared minus 15x Add 1 to both sides makes it 56. Need something that multiplies to 56 and adds up to 15. What's 56 divided by 3? Is it? Oh, hello. How about 7 and 8? So 7 times 8 is 56. If I make them both negative, -7 right here from the insides, and -8 from the outsides, -7 and -8 make -15. So I got the inner outers to add to -15, and they multiply to positive 56. So there's the zeros. So one of them is at 7, and the other one is at 8. Okay, let's get the vertex. So right here, I've got, so I've got x squared minus 15x plus 56. Instead of equals 0, now it's equal to y, so I can get an x and a y point. Move the 56 to the other side. Okay, half of 15 is 15 halves, or 7.5. If you want to go decimals, I'm going to use my calculator probably anyway. So I need 7.5 squared. 7.5 squared is 5625. So I'm adding 5625 here. No multiplier, so I'm going to add 5625 here. So the perfect square, x minus 7.5 all squared, and y plus 0.25. There's our vertex. Vertex is at 7.5, -0.25. Okay, I want to go, the multiplier is just 1, so it's over 1, up 1. So the next point over 1 on the x will be 8.5, and up 1 from the y will be 0.75. Then going over 1 the other way, 7.5 back 1, puts that at 6.5, up 75. The zeros are at 8, 0, and 7, 0. So all that should make a parabola. Okay, 8 and 7, really close over here. There's the 8 and there's the 7. The vertex is at 7.5, down 0.25, 7.5, down 0.25, so really tight in there. Then 8.5 up 3/4, so 8.5 up 3/4, and 6.5 up 3/4 right there. So it makes this little parabola right in there. Okay, I'll move these two things to the other side so it's equal to 0. So I'll add a and subtract 2. So I have 5a squared, adding an a makes that minus 30a, subtracting 2 makes that negative 80. Looks like I can factor a 5 out of all that. So dividing a 5 out of that makes a squared. Dividing a 5 out of that is a 6a. And 80 divided by 5 is 16. Okay, so I need to try to get the zeros here. So let's see, something that multiplies to 16 while adding to 6. How about 8 times 2? So I need 8 and 2. So 8 times 2 is 16, but they need to add up to negative 6. So if I make these negative 8, if I make these positive 2, now negative 8 and positive 2 is negative 6, check. Negative 8 times positive 2 is negative 16, so I got it factored. So here's the zeros. The 5 doesn't matter because 5 does not equal 0 anyway. What makes that one 0 is 8, and what makes that one 0 is negative 2. There's the zeros. 8 and negative 2. The 5 is going to end up being the height number eventually. So I'm going to pick it up right here. 5a squared minus 30a minus 80 equals y. Move over the 80. If I move over the 80, I have that. So I'm going to factor out the 5. So dividing both of those by 5 leaves x squared minus 6x. I'm leaving a hole because I need to have the 6 to negative 3 and square into that hole. So negative 3 squared is plus 9. Okay, it looks like I added 9, but it was times 5, so I really added 45. So I'll add 45 over here. So I've got the 5, the x minus 3 squared, that's the perfect square. Now negative 80 plus 45. I'm going to divide both sides by 5, so we've got x minus 3 squared, and then 1/5 y minus 35, and there's our vertex at 335. Seems like something is not right there. Yeah, it's not right here. I didn't think that was right. This negative 80 on this side should have been a plus 80 right there. 80 plus 45 is not 35. It's 125. It's positive 125. This is positive 125. See, I knew that couldn't be right because that would put the vertex here. And since it was positive, it has to loop up, and the zeros were beneath it. Okay, so now we got a vertex at 3, negative 125. The vertex is way down here somewhere. Okay, so I'll go 1 point more on the x, so I should go over 1 and add 1 here, but the y is multiplied by 5, so go over 1 up 5. That puts it at negative 120. And going 1 the other way puts the x at 2, and 5 up from that is negative 120. So those two are obviously not on the grid. And then the zeros were at 8, 0, and negative 2, 0. So I'll plot this one, 3, negative 125. 3, negative 125 is way down here. When you do that, just label it like this. The other two are going to be difficult to graph. They're right next to it. So I'll just leave those two off the picture. And there's that graph. Okay, so you got to find the zeros, then you got to complete the square, find the vertex, then go over 1, up whatever the multiplier was, so that you can have these 5 points. The vertex, 1 point to the right, 1 point to the left, and the 2 zeros, and graph